Hello there, it's Deborah Irene with Storytime coming to you today, the second day of the new year 2022, with stories and lessons from my mother, Helen Herbert Gillum. And as you recall, we have been focusing on her siblings. She loved her siblings and wanted to pay tribute to them. And there's a section, a small little passage about each one of her siblings in the back of her book, Helen's Heritage, called The Clan. And we are up to the seventh child. Now, of course, you can see my Christmas tree in the background, and we've just closed out the holiday season and are beginning a new year. And I know that at this time of year, we should be a joyous time, but it is a difficult year for those who have suffered loss, and we try to hope for the new year. I remember as a little girl asking my mother, of the 16 children that my grandmother and my grandfather had, did she have any miscarriages, or were any of them stillborn? And Mother said that as far as she knew, she never heard any stories about any miscarriages or stillborns, but there were 2 children who did not live to adulthood, and we are going to read about those today. And so the first one that we're going to read about was the 7th child, and it was a girl. And her name was Dorothy Luella. There are no pictures to show of baby Dorothy. Mama and Poppy had to face the catastrophe that none of us want to face, the death of a baby. Dorothy was the 7th child and 5th daughter. She was born on New Year's Eve, December 31, 1914. I want to pause here for a minute and tell you that these 2 children that they lost prior to adulthood were both born in December. And the holidays for them, I'm sure, were very sad, but they had to continue on. They had other children to raise, and they had a life to live. So I just want to point that out. This one was born on New Year's Eve, December 31, 1914. Dorothy Luella. The death certificate states she died of bronchial pneumonia on March 22, 1915, not quite 3 months old. A newspaper obituary confirms her date of birth and death with the death certificate, although her tombstone dates are different. I remember that headstones were added to the graves of the 2 children who died many years later by Poppy. My guess is that the formal documents are correct, though. I once heard Poppy say that he was away working in the wheat fields and that he received a card from Mama saying he needed to come home because the baby was sick. He couldn't leave immediately and thought it was one of his grandbabies. Now remember, by this time, they already had grown children. But when he was finally able to return home, he learned it was his own baby. In the weeks prior to Dorothy's death on March 11 and March 18, 1915, there were reports in the local newspaper of the Herbert baby being very sick. The final obituary states, through a period of 3 weeks, she suffered intensely. She now rests from all pain. Funeral services were conducted by the writer at Slaggle Creek, where the little body was laid to rest. The family wishes to express their thanks to all who helped or sympathized with them in the sickness and death of their child. I wonder if she would have had blonde hair, or black hair, or blue eyes, or brown. She has been resting in peace for a very long time now. Someday, I will know." That's what my mother had to say about the sister that she never knew, who died long before she was born. She was almost 3 months old, Dorothy Luella. I often wonder too, what would she have been like? Would she have been one like my mother stayed? Would she have been a dark one or a light one? Would she have had blonde hair or black hair? We don't know, but my mother knows now because she's in heaven with her. So let's jump ahead now, advance a few years. That happened in 1915. Now let's fast forward here to 1933, the year before my mother was born. They lost another child, a boy. He was a little bit older. His name was Willard Benton, and they called him Benton. Now, when we were trying to find pictures of everyone, we found one picture, only one, of Benton. I hope you can see that there, when he was a little boy standing next to a very old car. That's the only picture we were able to find of him. Here's what Mother had to say about her brother Benton. Like many of my other siblings, the 12th child and 6th boy, Willard was called by his middle name, Benton. He was born on December 11, 1925. Tragically, he died before his 8th birthday on September 12, 1933, just 4 months before I was born. How difficult that must have been for Mama, pregnant with me and having to deal with the loss of another child. Benton was between Eunice and Louise, and their memories of him did not fade away. Just like the features I would have, his locks were blonde and his eyes were blue. Everyone loved him. He was a good little boy. The entire family was heartbroken with his death. Eunice remembered that he first saw a doctor in Morrisville who thought he had a simple stomach ache and sent him home. When he did not improve, Dad decided to take him to the hospital in Bolivar. Dad picked him up and carried him. He told his sisters and brothers bye as he looked over Dad's shoulder. 9-year-old Eunice cried when they walked out the door, and when asked why, she said, "I don't think he's going to come home." You know, Aunt Eunice, who's still with us today, had a premonition, and she was very saddened about her brother. And he didn't. The doctor at the hospital performed an appendectomy, but infection had already set in. Too little, too late. The small local newspaper reported Benton Herbert, the little son of Mr. and Mrs. Bernard Herbert, who has been very seriously ill for some time, was very low yesterday, and there seemed little hope of his recovery. Then the following day, the same newspaper reported, following an attack of appendicitis, which necessitated an operation, Willard B. Herbert, 7-year-old son of Mr. and Mrs. Bernard Herbert from near Schlegel, passed away at the hospital in Bolivar Tuesday. Louise loved him and told me throughout our childhood how much she missed him. The loss and hurt ran deep in her heart for years. Eunice said he was a sweet, sweet boy. He was buried next to baby Dorothy Luella the day after he died. Gone but not forgotten. Someday I will meet him too. And she has. Again, he was born on December 11, 1925, 10 years after Dorothy Luella, and he died the year before my mother was born in September 1933. I guess I'm thinking that this time of year, Christmas is past, we look forward to a new year, and there are a lot of people who have suffered loss of loved ones, whether it be children, parents, other friends, and relatives. And they do have to find the strength and the hope to go on. I would like to read you another short little story that I wrote. And I wrote this back in December of 2012. It was about a time in my life when I was during childbearing years. I have not lost any children, but I did have a miscarriage, and I was disappointed. And I had to reach out for hope for the years to come as well. So I'm going to read this to you because it fits with the stories of loss. This is from my book, Someday I Will Write, and it's chapter 32, and it's called And It Came to Pass. There's nothing like Christmas time for a child to learn patience. There's so much anticipation, hype, and expectation leading up to this day. And then finally the day is here and gone. Or in other words, the culmination is, and it came to pass. Much hope abounds in these 5 little words, and it came to pass. Reading these words and stories or seeing things come to pass in others' lives gives us hope for our own circumstances. These words are used repeatedly in the Christmas story told in the Gospel of Luke in the King James Version. And it came to pass, and it came to pass, and it came to pass. Everything came to pass as prophesied and in the fullness of time. I remember a time in my life when I was discouraged. I was a mother of 2 little boys, but wanted to complete my family with a 3rd child, and I felt like I was under a time crunch. I miscarried a baby, and many people thought that since I had 2 children, this little misfortune would quickly fade away. They were wrong. My husband and I both were surprised with the grief that consumed me. Why had this happened? Was God angry with me? I knew many others had suffered the same loss and more. But when acquaintances tried to console me with similar words like these, well, those words were anything but consoling. Of course, others had suffered more than I had, and of course, I was grateful for my 2 healthy sons whom I loved with my whole heart. But I still ached and suffered loss. I thrust myself into God's love book of Psalms to remind myself that He did care and love me. Each time I came across a promise or statement of His love or concern, I highlighted it and reread it. And I reread stories like the Christmas story and soaked in the words, and it came to pass, and it came to pass, and it came to pass, and it came to pass that my hope was restored. Faith arose again, and I was bold and declared, I will have another child, a Christmas child. Well, maybe some thought I was really going out on a limb by saying that, but we all need a little miracle every now and then. And it came to pass. He impressed upon me, and I declared, at Christmas time the following year, my 3rd son was born. Oh, I realize that some would question my use of the word miracle here, but you see, for me, I needed to believe again, to hope again. He was my miracle of hope. Whenever I reflect on this season of the Lord's birth, I reflect on my personal miracle when He heard my cry and granted my wish, and it came to pass. 22 birthdays have now passed, and I still need to be reminded, and it came to pass, and it came to pass. Today's needs and desires are different, but remembering yesterday's miracle gives me strength to abide while I wait. I will abide and hope today, tomorrow, next week, next month, and the next if necessary. Maybe this will be the year that I will once again say, and it came to pass. And if you're in that position today where you need your faith and your hope restored, I hope that you receive some encouragement from this. My grandmother and my grandfather had to go on in life after they suffered the loss of a couple of children. And while I didn't suffer that, I did suffer loss, and I hoped again. So I hope that you will find hope for this new year as it's starting and beginning. All things are new, and I hope that your desires and your dreams will be renewed in your spirit, and that faith will be restored, and that you will see things come to pass. My mother was an encourager, Helen Herbert Gillum, and if you would like to get her book and learn about her faith and her life, she would be pleased to share that with you. The name of her book is Helen's Heritage, and you can find that at deborahirene.com. And we hope that you have a wonderful new year. This is Deborah Irene with Storytime and Stories and Lessons from my mother.